Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the other side of the news. Let's take a look. We're going to look today at the opinion page of the Wall Street Journal on the 6th of July, 2020. Two things jump out at me. Let's look first at Trump at Mount Rushmore. Trump at Mount Rushmore. Progressives deride his defense of America's founding principles by the editorial board. Some of the headlines that came out of Trump's 4th of July speech at Mount Rushmore include from the Los Angeles Times, at Mount Rushmore, Trump uses 4th of July celebration to stoke a culture war. From the New York Times, Trump uses Mount Rushmore speech to deliver divisive culture war message. And from the Associated Press, Trump pushes racial division, flouts virus rules at Mount Rushmore. And now this is what the Journal has to say. President Trump delivered one of his best speeches of his presidency Friday evening at Mount Rushmore. And for evidence, consider the echo chamber headlines above. Those I just read to you. The chorus of independent media voices understands that Mr. Trump is trying to rally the country in defense of traditional American principles that are now under radical and unprecedented assault. Dark, in most respects, Mr. Trump's speech was a familiar 4th of July ode to liberty and U.S. achievement that any president might have delivered in front of an American landmark. Quote, no nation has done more to advance the human condition than the United States of America, and no people have done more to promote human progress than the citizens of our great nation, unquote, he said. Contrary to the media reporting, the America Mr. Trump described as one of genuine racial equality and diversity. He highlighted the central idea of the Declaration of Independence that all men are created equal. As he rightly put it, quote, these immortal words set in motion the unstoppable march of freedom, unquote, that included the abolition of slavery more than half a century later. Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King, Jr. also believed this to be true, and Mr. Trump cited them both, as he did other American notables, black and white, historic and more recent. There was not a hint of racial division in his words except for those who want to distort their meaning for their own political purposes. In any other time, this paean to American exceptionalism would have been unexceptional. But this year, even Mr. Trump's speech backdrop, Mount Rushmore, with his four presidential faces, is politically charged. Each of those presidents, Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, Theodore Roosevelt, is under assault for ancient sins against modern values, as progressives seek to expunge their statues and even their names from American life. Mr. Trump's great offense against the culturally ascendant progressives was to defend these presidential legacies. Divisive? Mr. Trump's speech was certainly direct in his typical style, but it was only divisive if you haven't been paying attention to the divisions now being stoked on the political left across American institutions. Mr. Trump had the temerity to point out that the last few weeks have seen an explosion of, quote, cancel culture, driving people from their jobs, shaming dissenters, and demanding total submission from anyone who disagrees, unquote. Describing this statement of fact as divisive proves his point. Newspaper editors are being fired over headlines and op-eds after millennial staff revolts. Boeing CEO David Calhoun last week welcomed the resignation of a communications executive for opposing 33 years ago, when he was in the military, women in combat. The Washington Post ran an op-ed this weekend urging that the name of America's first president be struck from Washington and Lee University. Any one of these events would be remarkable, but together with literally thousands of others around the country, they represent precisely what Mr. Trump describes, a left-wing cultural revolution against traditional American values of free speech and political intolerance. And he called for Americans not to cower but to oppose this assault. Quote, we must demand that our children are taught once again to see America as did Reverend Martin Luther King when he said that the founders had signed a promissory note to every future generation. Dr. King saw that the mission of justice required us to fully embrace our founding ideas. He called on his fellow citizens not to rip down their heritage, but to live up to their heritage, unquote. Contrast that with the New York Times 1619 Project, which derides America's founding in 1776 and replaces it with a history that distills the country into a slave-owning enterprise that remains racist to the core. Who is really stoking division and a culture war? Mr. Trump is far from the ideal spokesman for this message, given that he has often used the politics of division himself. But liberal elites have created this opening for him by failing to stand up against the radicals who are using the justified anger at the killing of George Floyd as a cudgel to hijack America's liberal institutions and impose their intolerant political views on everyone else. No doubt Mr. Trump hopes this theme can restart his election campaign, and for once he gave a speech that was about something more than himself. Stay on script, add a second term agenda, and he might even have a chance. But whatever the result is in November, Mr. Trump's Mount Rushmore theme isn't going away. Progressive elites are courting a backlash that will have more than one champion. Yep, that's very well said by the Wall Street Journal. Extremely well said. I've been somewhat indifferent to Trump. I like his policies. I can't stand the man, but I don't see how I can vote Democratic with any conscience because I feel they just want to tear down the country. And I like our country. I love our country. I think our country does a lot of right things. Our country's motivations are really right. Our country tries very hard to do the best thing when whatever we've tried to do, even if sometimes the results aren't what we wanted. And even if sometimes we've done some things pretty stupidly, we still, I think our motives are good. Let's see what else we got. We got one more piece today, and this is about Joe Biden. Let's take a look. Joe Biden bows to the teachers' unions. You'll have an NEA member in the White House, he says. This is written by the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal again. Here's a place Joe Biden differs from his old boss. President Obama had fraught relations with the teachers' unions, including the National Education Association, which in 2014 called unsuccessfully for the resignation of Education Secretary Arne Duncan. Mr. Biden, seeking the NEA's endorsement at a virtual assembly on Friday, pledged his fealty to the union, noting that his wife Jill is a member. Quote, "When we win this election, we're going to get the support you need and the respect you deserve," unquote, Mr. Biden said. "You don't just have a partner in the White House, you'll have an NEA member in the White House. And if I'm not listening, I'm going to be sleeping alone in the Lincoln bedroom," unquote. If a presidential candidate spoke to a special interest group with that kind of amorous devotion, the caterwauling in the press would never end. Or what about this line from Mr. Biden? Quote, "This is going to be a teacher-oriented Department of Education," unquote. Oh, not a student-oriented one? Mr. Biden didn't get a question about school choice during the Friday forum, but he has made clear that he believes the union dogma, quote, "No privately funded charter school or private charter school would receive a penny of federal money," unquote. He told the NEA in March when it endorsed him in the Democratic primary. This is a marked departure. The Obama administration increased federal funds for charter schools. From 2000 to 2017, the share of public school students who attended a charter rose to 6% from 1%. Behind those statistics are thousands of stories of children, many of them Black and Hispanic, who escaped failing public schools to get a better education. Mr. Biden seems downright eager to repudiate this record. He told the NEA on Friday that his plan involves higher salaries for educators, universal pre-K, tripling the funding for Title I schools. He pledged to double the number of school psychologists and counselors and nurses and social workers in school, and to help educators wipe out the burden of their own student debt. Teachers first. Put it on a bumper sticker, Mr. Biden, and hope people don't notice the corollary that is the students, and especially poor students and majority students, come second. Well, that's very well said, editorial, and actually the reality is it's not so much teachers first, it's adults first. And so his motto might as well be children last. We've come a long way from children first, haven't we? Thank you very much today for watching The Other Side of the News. Please hit the like button, please subscribe, and we'll do this again tomorrow. Bye-bye.